Stage 1. The last reserves. Hours 0 to 24. The moment you stop eating, your body does not panic. Not yet. It has been here before. Every night during sleep. Every time a meal runs late. It has a plan for this. Your liver is holding approximately 100 grams of glycogen, stored glucose, enough to fuel your brain and body for roughly 12 to 24 hours. Your muscles hold another 400 grams of glycogen, but that supply is mostly reserved for the muscles themselves. As those stores deplete, blood sugar begins to fall. The brain, which runs almost exclusively on glucose and consumes 20% of your body's energy, begins to notice, and it tells you loudly and clearly, in the only language it knows. Hunger is not a simple sensation. It is a full hormonal campaign. Ghrelin, produced in the stomach, surges and travels to the brain, activating the hypothalamus. Your thoughts begin drifting to food. Concentration becomes harder. Irritability rises. Your body is redirecting mental resources toward the single goal of finding calories. After 12 to 24 hours without food, the liver's glycogen is exhausted. The easy fuel is gone. The body has to make a decision. And the decision it makes next is one of the most consequential biological choices in human physiology. Stage 2. The first sacrifice. Days 1 to 3. With glycogen gone, the body turns to the next available source, protein. Specifically, your muscle tissue. This process is called gluconeogenesis, the creation of new glucose from non-glucose sources. Your liver takes amino acids stripped from muscle protein and rebuilds them into glucose molecules. It is metabolically expensive, inefficient, and it destroys muscle mass to do it. But the brain needs glucose, and the brain gets what it needs. Days 1 to 3 are, by most accounts, the hardest part of starvation. Hunger is at its most intense. The body has not yet adapted fully. The available glucose is falling, but the switch to an alternative fuel has not yet kicked in. This window, caught between the old system and the new one, is the most physically and mentally brutal period. The psychological effects during this stage were documented in extraordinary detail in 1944. A researcher named Ansel Keys recruited 36 healthy young men for what became known as the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. He reduced their caloric intake to approximately half their normal level and documented what happened to them over 6 months. What Keys found was not just physical deterioration. The men became obsessed with food. They talked about it constantly. They collected cookbooks. They fantasized about meals in extraordinary detail. Several began reading recipe books the way other people read novels. Their entire mental architecture was being restructured around the single goal of finding calories. Sexual interest disappeared. Social withdrawal increased. Irritability, depression, and anxiety became severe. One man cut off 3 of his fingers with an axe. He claimed accidentally. Several others required psychiatric intervention. The brain, deprived of adequate fuel, does not simply slow down. It changes who you are. Stage 3, the paradox. Days 3 to 7. Around day 3 to 4, something unexpected happens. The hunger begins to fade. The body has made its decision. It has switched its primary fuel source from glucose to fat. Your fat cells, adipose tissue, begin releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream. The liver converts these fatty acids into molecules called ketone bodies. And the brain, which previously ran almost exclusively on glucose, begins accepting ketones as fuel. This metabolic state is called ketosis, and for a period, days 3 through 7 and beyond, it is extraordinarily efficient. The body has access to enormous reserves of energy in its fat stores. The average person is carrying tens of thousands of calories in adipose tissue. For the first time since the starvation began, supply and demand are temporarily balanced. Some people in this stage report an unexpected clarity. The desperate hunger has eased. The ketones provide a stable, consistent fuel. History is full of accounts from people who fasted for extended periods, religious figures, hunger strikers, extreme survival situations, describing a period of calm, focus, and reduced suffering somewhere in the first week. But this is not recovery. This is the body burning through its emergency reserves. The clock is running. The fat stores, however large, are finite. And other systems, ones the body has quietly been shutting down to conserve energy, are beginning to feel the consequences. Stage 4, the long burn. Weeks 1 to 4, the body is now running on fat, and it is making adjustments, deep, systemic adjustments, to make that fuel last as long as possible. Your basal metabolic rate, the baseline energy your body burns simply to exist, drops by 20 to 40%. Your heart rate slows. your body temperature falls, your blood pressure drops, your thyroid output decreases, slowing every metabolic process. The body is not dying, it is becoming extraordinarily economical. Muscle breakdown continues, but at a much slower rate than in the first days. The body has learned to protect its protein reserves. It is preferentially burning fat, because it has to, because fat is what it has, and sparing muscle where it can. The reproductive system shuts down entirely. In women, menstruation stops. In men, testosterone drops to a fraction of its normal level. The body has made a calculation. Reproduction is expensive, reproduction is non-essential, reproduction is suspended. This is not a malfunction, it is a feature. An ancient adaptation that has kept the human species alive through famines. The immune system follows. It is metabolically expensive, maintaining immune surveillance, producing white blood cells, keeping inflammatory responses ready. The body cannot afford this at full capacity. It cuts back. The starving person becomes increasingly vulnerable to infections that their body would normally handle without noticing. Hair begins to fall out. The body has suspended investment in anything non-critical. Hair follicles are metabolically expensive and entirely non-essential for survival. They are among the first luxuries the body cancels. Stage 5, when the fat runs out. Weeks 3 to 6. How long the fat reserves last depends entirely on how much the person had when starvation began. A lean person may reach this stage in 3 weeks. A person with significant fat reserves may not reach it for 2 months or more. When fat reserves are exhausted, the body has no choice. It returns to protein breakdown, but this time with no glycogen and no fat to moderate the demand. The protein catabolism is now aggressive, urgent, and indiscriminate, and the body is no longer just consuming skeletal muscle. It begins consuming the proteins of internal organs. The kidneys lose mass, the liver shrinks, and the heart, the one muscle that cannot be rested, the one muscle that must keep contracting every second, is no exception. Paradoxically, the starving body begins to swell. The protein that normally maintains osmotic pressure in the blood, keeping fluid inside blood vessels, has been depleted. Fluid leaks out of the vessels into surrounding tissue. The abdomen, the legs, and the face fill with fluid. The swollen appearance of famine victims is not fat. It is the body's vessels losing their ability to hold water. The electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium, begin to fall dangerously out of balance. These are not just minerals. They are the electrical charge carriers that allow the heart to maintain its rhythm. Stage 6. The point of no return. There is a point in starvation where survival without medical intervention becomes impossible, even if food is provided. The body has crossed a threshold from which it cannot pull itself back. The heart muscle has thinned to the point where each contraction is weaker than the last. The cardiac output, the volume of blood the heart pushes out per minute, has dropped significantly. Organs that were already stressed begin receiving inadequate blood flow. They begin to fail, one by one, in sequence. In most cases, the final mechanism is cardiac arrest. The heart, weakened by protein catabolism, destabilized by electrolyte imbalance, overwhelmed by the demands of a collapsing system, simply stops maintaining its rhythm. The cardiac arrest that ends starvation is not dramatic. It is the quiet conclusion of a process that has been running for weeks. The average person with access to water can survive approximately 30 to 70 days without food, depending on their body composition and health at the start. Without water, the timeline collapses to 3 to 5 days. The longest medically documented hunger strike, with independent verification, lasted 74 days. The body's capacity for survival, even in total food deprivation, is extraordinary, but it is not infinite. Stage 7. The cruel twist. This final stage is not what you expect. This is not what happens when starvation continues. This is what happens when it stops. When a person who has been severely starved is given food, particularly carbohydrates, the sudden influx of glucose triggers a massive release of insulin. Insulin drives glucose, phosphate, and other electrolytes out of the bloodstream and into the cells. The already depleted levels of these minerals in the blood drop catastrophically in the space of hours. This is called refeeding syndrome, and it causes exactly what the electrolyte imbalance from late-stage starvation causes: cardiac arrhythmia, heart failure, and death. Doctors have watched patients survive weeks of starvation, only to die within 24 hours of receiving food, because the food was given too quickly. This is not a rare edge case. When the Nazi concentration camps were liberated in 1945, Allied soldiers, overcome with compassion for the survivors, gave them food immediately, generously, as much as they wanted. Many survivors who had endured months of starvation died within days of liberation, not from the starvation, from being fed. The soldiers who tried to save them did not know. Nobody knew yet. Medical teams now know that refeeding after prolonged starvation must be done with extreme care. The body that has adapted so profoundly to starvation cannot be snapped back to normal without being walked back carefully. The human body will fight to survive longer than almost any other animal relative to its size. It adapts, conserves, cannibalizes, and restructures itself across 7 distinct stages, each one a more desperate version of the last. It will consume itself from the outside in, and from the non-essential to the essential. It will shut down everything it cannot afford to run. It will protect the brain until the very end. Survival comes at a cost, and starvation makes sure you can feel every part of it.